lifelong connections through our alma mater. We love providing opportunities like this one, where alumni can learn, network, and give back. So settle in and enjoy today's program. And if you like what you hear today, please share it on social media using the hashtag #ThyLoyalChildren. Thanks again for joining us. Go Bearcats.
And now I'm going to pass it on over to Carla Walker, Savannah Sullivan, and Erin Lefevre. Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carla Walker. I am the what is called the Climate Advisor for the City of Cincinnati. I'll go into that a little bit more, but I think it might be helpful to also have Savannah Sullivan introduce herself. And Erin, you may know most of the folks on the call, but it would be great for you to introduce yourself as well. Savannah?
Sure. Thanks, Carla. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me, UC. Great to see all your faces and see all who's on the line. I'm currently the climate policy lead at Green Umbrella, which is Greater Cincinnati's Regional Sustainability Alliance. And most recently, I had the pleasure of working with Carla in the Office of Environment and Sustainability as a climate and community resilience analyst.
And I'm Erin Lefevre. I am a UC grad in 2016, and I'm the Assistant Sustainability Coordinator at the university currently.
Great. So today's discussion, thanks guys. So today's discussion and event is all about environmental justice. And I just want to let you guys know what we'll do here is give a general overview and some framing. I'll do that. And then I'll have myself and Savannah kind of step through what that looks like and what has been happening here in Cincinnati and in the Southwest Ohio region. And then Erin will speak a little bit about what sustainable development and environmental justice activities are happening across the UC campus. And then we'll open it up for Q&A, which you can definitely use your chat function for. Hopefully everyone has had an opportunity to take a look at the incredible TEDx program and presentation that Majora Carter gave, and I think we shared that with the invite and in the promotional materials. I'm a huge fan of Majora Carter's. I've been following her career for several years, and I just think it really gives a very good understanding and introduction to this concept and to this topic. And more so in terms of introducing the topic, it tells it through the lens of a story of an individual who has discovered her agency in this work, has leveraged that agency, has become an ardent advocate, and in the end has produced a result that has actually changed, dynamically changed a community that has been suffering and impacted by policies that have overburdened that community. And that's really kind of the background and kind of framing around what environmental justice can, environmental injustices can look like and how people can begin to address them. It's an incredibly complicated, multifaceted kind of approach that Majora is taking in the South Bronx, but it's not something that is solely rested there. A lot of communities are now finally beginning to have that voice in decision making at the local level, and it's really incredible to see. And this isn't something that, again, is new. I know that the term and the concept and the ideas of EJ were rooted in things. This term isn't necessarily used so much anymore, but when this concept was being introduced to the mainstream environmental movement, it was really around the idea and concept of environmental racism, which is essentially the same thing, and how racial issues have impacted policy decisions that have overburdened these marginalized communities. What I want to what I want to talk about now is just kind of like where we are nationally and where we were nationally, right? Just to kind of give us a sense of like what's happening now in our country and how that is boiling down to where cities are and what cities are doing. For the last 4 years, we were in an administration that was anti-environmental. And, the sad thing about that was that, it was really, really hard to kind of fight that on a national level, with the number of rollbacks on environmental legislation that the Trump administration had, the least of which included, the destruction of the Office of Environmental Justice. It was really, really a challenge to try and figure out how the EPA was going to be continuing to be the Environmental Protection Agency. I used to joke and call it the Environmental Pollution Agency because that's how the Trump administration kind of pivoted the role of the EPA. But out of all of that, there were some things that actually were good that happened, believe it or not, right? With the removal of the U.S. from the Paris Climate Accords, what happened was that there was this gap in what was being done here in the U.S. And so cities, municipalities, state organizations really stepped up and decided, if the national government is going to remove themselves from the process, that does not preclude local governments from taking a role. And so a number of cities began to really step out there and craft their climate action plans, devise their climate action strategies, or accelerate their climate action strategies, and begin to kind of really take this on for themselves. And it was really kind of exciting to see that not only cities were doing this at the local level and beginning to work together and share best practices, but all of this action really helps advance their voice at the global table when we, now that we're getting back into the Paris Accord, cities will actually be able to talk about what they are doing. I actually firmly believe that cities are the, if you will, front line of addressing climate change, but also they are really the places where you have the most innovation, right? And so looking at what cities are able to do, I want to talk a little bit about what Cincinnati has done and this role of the climate advisor. And I will also share that Cincinnati has, we've been working on climate action strategies since 2008, when then Mayor Mallory, under his administration, crafted the first climate action plan for the city of Cincinnati through some of the work that was being done at the U.S. Conference of Mayors with a number of other cities. Every 5 years, the city of Cincinnati has revised that climate strategy, right? The very first climate strategy really focused on greenhouse gas emissions and what that baseline was. In the next iteration of that plan in 2013, we started looking at how do you add an element of resilience to some of those strategies. And then in our most current revision in 2018, we started talking about how to include equity as a part of that plan. And so as a climate advisor, I'm working with the city of Cincinnati through something called the American Cities Climate Challenge, which is a 2.5 year program through Bloomberg Philanthropies that brings 25 cities into a cohort to provide them with additional capacity to help accelerate those climate goals. And it was actually because the President Trump removed us from the Paris Climate Accords that the climate challenge became a reality. And so some of the work that I've been doing in centering equity in that work has really been looking at energy equity, electric vehicles, solar, providing solar access to communities, and looking at some of the transit work. In Majora Carter's presentation, she kind of rolled out a list of statistics, right, that she saw with that around the South Bronx. And I just took a look at what some of the statistics that she shared, and I looked at where Cincinnati was. She had a statistic about asthma, right? The percent of children who currently have asthma in Cincinnati, 24% of the children in Cincinnati, 24% of the African American children have asthma in Cincinnati, compared to 6% of white children in Cincinnati who have asthma. In terms of the poverty rate in Cincinnati, one in for the population of African Americans in Cincinnati, 38% of African Americans are impoverished here. That's 2 out of every 5. When you compare that to the white population in Cincinnati, it's 15.7% of the white population lives in poverty in Cincinnati, and that's 1 out of 8. Of white Americans, white Cincinnatians are living in that impoverished level. So the numbers are kind of staggering, right? When we started looking at things like energy equity and addressing energy equity in Cincinnati, there was a national study that looked at energy burden in across, I think it was 40 different urban cities. And this was in 2016. And energy burden is the percentage of household income that you might spend on your energy expenses, right? Cincinnati was designated as being the 8th highest energy burden city for low income families. We're the 8th highest energy burden for renters, and we're the 9th highest energy burden city for African Americans. So a lot of that helped inform some of the work that Savannah and I did over the last couple of years in this climate advisory role, creating a suite of energy equity programs that really look at providing energy efficient services for the low income renters in Cincinnati. And heretofore, that was a segment of our population that did not have energy efficiency services. And so we really created that program by centering the renter in that program, so that that particular population could not only have upgrades done to the rental units that they live in, but also receive bill assistance to support them, but making sure also that they receive an energy efficiency education that goes with them and that lasts or that stays with them if they decide to move, right? Some of the other programs we worked on are, I mentioned the solar program. The city of Cincinnati is beginning to launch something called Solarize Cincinnati. And it's a co-op based kind of model that homeowners can be a part of. But this work is also really working with community-based organizations, so that those individuals who are in the marginalized community or low income or African American families can also be a part of this. And in that co-op model, are able to kind of make decisions about what kind of solar panels can be purchased at a discount price. Some of the other work that I'm working on, that I'm doing with the city around EJ, is through some of the transit work that I'm now working on for the next several months. If y'all remember, last November, we had the transit ballot initiative that got passed here in Cincinnati. And thankfully, we can now actually do real transit work in this community. But what we're working on now with the city and a couple of other partners is developing, now that we have the transit funding, we want to develop an equitable community engagement process on how those transit projects can be presented to the city, presented to different communities, and how communities can take part in developing those transit initiatives. And then lastly, I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing around what I call EV Cincy. I know one of our EV ambassadors is on the call. Hello, Denise. Cincy is really about educating Cincinnatians around the opportunities and benefits of electrification and electric vehicles. And a lot of people immediately think of Teslas when you think of electric vehicles, which is great, but that's really out of the pricing for a lot of families. But what we've been trying to do with Cincy is connect to as many people as possible and let them know about the benefits up and down the economic scale. One of the things we're doing in the next week is there's an EV Cincy event that really brings a couple of experts to the table to talk about electric vehicles in communities of color. I'll chat the registration link there to you, and you are more than welcome to join. I'm going to turn it over to Savannah, because even though she is now in this new position where she's not with the city of Cincinnati, there's a lot of cross-mingled work that we're doing with her at Green Umbrella, and I'll have her share not only that, but some of the work that she's doing regionally to bring EJ issues to the fore.
Great, thank you, Carla. Yeah, so hi everyone again. As mentioned, I'm with Green Umbrella, the region's sustainability alliance, and I want to talk a bit about the sort of way we use justice and equity as a lens through which we view all of our work. And when we look at the way climate and environmental issues affect our city, we're all here, we know it's clear that some communities and vulnerable populations are impacted in disproportionate ways. And in sort of government work, focusing on equity and justice and climate preparedness really helps plan to spread the benefits of sort of city governmental services. And a quote I think of often is, "A community's success or failure in preparing for the impacts of climate change will be measured by how it is able to address the needs of those on the front lines of impacts and those already suffering from a range of challenges, including lack of economic opportunity, racism, and pollution." And so I bring up that quote because there are these tenets of justice I'm going to highlight as I talk about some of the work that we're trying to do in the region, and organizations like Green Umbrella and many others in our region are moving this work forward alongside our local government. So keep that in mind. So one important tenet of justice is attention to procedure, which means addressing power structures and access to participation in decision making. And a key to this is ensuring equitable, inclusive, and meaningful engagement, and asking, how does our engagement shift power, build trust, and ensure accountability, both structurally in our present day and intergenerationally for generations to come? So a project that Carla was referring to that we are partnering on, so even though I'm no longer working with the city, it's fun to get to see Carla every week on our project calls. One example is a procedural environmental justice effort called the Climate Safe Program, which is bringing together partners to explore the relationship between historical race-based housing segregation and the current and predicted impacts of climate change. So this effort is led by Groundwork Ohio River Valley. I encourage you to check out their organization as well. We're working in partnership with the City of Cincinnati's Office of Environment and Sustainability and Green Umbrella. And that project is really working to ensure equity and inclusion in preparing the city for effects of climate change. And we're piloting an approach through Climate Safe for residents to provide their neighborhood level expertise and share a vision for their community and co-create recommendations in the Green Cincinnati Plan, which is, as Carla mentioned, the city's sustainability playbook. And so this pilot will be taking place. We're actually launching it later today, which is fun. It will take place in Lower Price Hill, and it is structured as a resident advisory group with Lower Price Hill residents showing up and meeting with us regularly for the next several months to talk about their lived experience with climate change in their neighborhood, and begin having this conversation of, how can we include this in how the city plans across neighborhoods. And so we hope to continue this type of engagement. As I mentioned, this is a pilot, so stay tuned later this spring to learn more of the outcomes. So continuing on that thread, policies and programs to address climate impacts are often most effective at the local level. And so my forthcoming work, the policy work at Green Umbrella, I'll be working with local governments across our region, of which there are over 230 local government and kind of quasi-governmental entities. So a lot of folks out there in our 10-county region to work with. And we'll be working to highlight and accelerate climate and equity efforts across the region. And so it'll require attention to equitable procedure, like I just described, ensuring that frontline voices lead and inform systems level solutions, as well as attention to recognition, another tenet of equity, which is identifying and acknowledging injustices affecting specific populations, as well as distribution. So how do we, in the end, actually, through policy and programs, address the distribution of burdens, as well as the benefits of city programs across different populations? We know climate change is a global issue, but local governments and their residents end up absorbing many of the costs. And unfortunately, there's a current lack of capacity in our region to adapt and build resiliency. We're seeing more extreme heat days, more frequent and heavier rain events, and hotter summers here. They're causing more air quality alert days, heat-related illnesses and deaths across our region. And extreme precipitation will be causing flooding, landslides, and increased water pollution. These impacts are not felt equally as we're observing across our region. You know, folks are, in some communities, are likely to live near sources of pollution in flood zones, in homes with frequent sewer backups, and without air conditioning. So, you know, these are just systems levels issues, but it's shared across our region. So soon through this policy work, we'll be facilitating collaboration among government leaders to adopt solutions that will improve the quality of life, the resilience of the infrastructure itself, and the predictability of their budgets, and centering the needs of our most vulnerable residents. So in order to do that, increasingly cities are analyzing and spatializing the environmental and climate burdens that our most vulnerable communities face, collecting the quantitative and qualitative data that allow us to hold up a megaphone to the systemic nature of this work. But there's also another important component of this work that we'll be working on through these policy efforts, which is metrics and accountability. You know, often the success of sustainability programs is solely captured through the consideration of, you know, energy or cost savings, the number of participants in a program, and or the carbon emissions reduced. But some questions I want to throw out here today to you all is, what if we also held, you know, and captured successes through ensuring impacts aren't disproportionately borne, and that services are distributed to reduce that unequal burden? If we ensured climate and racial equity goals are integrated across all departments in our local governments, and if we measured success by diversifying the voices that not only lead the solutions, but characterize the problems themselves, how reparative and trust building are our climate actions? These are questions that can form sort of the new wave of how we evaluate regional climate action here. But again, like I said, we're just getting started on that policy work. I also wanted to highlight real quick just some other avenues that Green Umbrella is working on to ensure the environmental justice lens informs programs and policies across the region. First and foremost, we're working on a suite of both internal and external diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. Recently, we hosted a program called Preparing for the Racial Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Journey, which was facilitated by Robin A. Wright, another leader in this field similar to Majora Carter that I encourage you to check out. This event brought together, you know, our members to dive deeper into efforts to build a just environmental movement in our region, and, you know, explore the psychological journey towards anti-racism with respect to environmental justice. It's a key step, and so that workshop was recorded and it's available through our site. We will be continuing this work internally with our staff to better operationalize equity principles into our programs, as well as with our membership and general public-facing events. The final suite of regional efforts that I want to mention are impact teams. So these are teams that we convene in specific spaces to elevate frontline voices and, front and leaders in our communities, and have an emphasis on underserved populations. So one example is we have a Faith Communities Go Green impact team, which brings together diverse faith communities who seek to partner to create a more sustainable future. And that really cuts across our 10-county region and allows organizing to happen in, a broader range of communities that might not typically be engaging with policy advocacy. And so that's a way to bring together folks of these diverse backgrounds. And similarly, we have an impact team called Cincinnati Public Schools Outside. So getting to that intergenerational point of how do we begin imbuing environmental justice lens in our youth and get folks outside as part of their learning journey. And we also have initiatives at Green Umbrella related to food, trails and transit, and buildings. Wanted to highlight two examples: Community Voices in Food, which is working to amplify community voice and governance of food access and education organizations in Greater Cincinnati, as well as through Tri-State Trails, building a regional trail network, and in particular, an effort called Crown, working currently to connect the Crown Trail to UC, and making sure that these trails can go through low car ownership communities such as Avondale, Evanston, to ensure that folks in those communities can transport themselves readily to job opportunities and recreational opportunities, so on and so forth. So I know we threw a lot out there. I want to wrap up by saying that local voices like panelists and all of you tuning in today are a really important resource. So please reach out to Carla and I and our colleagues, because we love any sort of thoughts, new ideas, and engagement.
Thank you, Carla and Savannah. I know we've been talking at you a lot, so I won't take up too much more of your time, but I did just want to kind of reel it back into the university and talk about some of the ways that we're working towards environmental justice in our Office of Sustainability and across campus. And, as both Carla and Savannah were talking about, this is a really multifaceted issue, and therefore it requires a multifaceted approach. And that's what we try to do at the university. So we have things from educational events on environmental justice, what that means, and how to combat that through our documentaries, our lectures, engagement opportunities, all of which are currently virtual because of the pandemic, but we've continued to host those and bring in different panelists and community members. And additionally, all of those are free and open to the public so that anyone can access them. On top of that, we do have specific programs at the university. One that I'd love to highlight is our Bearcats Food Pantry for food insecure students on campus. And the Office of Sustainability actually donates all of our fresh produce from our garden on campus to the pantry. So not only are we putting food in the hands of those that need them in our community, but we're also getting fresh organic food for them as well. I wanted to highlight a few of our other services that are also free, trying to make access equitable for all. We have a bike rental service. So this is a bike share service through our UC Bike Kitchen located on campus for students, faculty, and staff. For free, they can rent a bike for up to a week. In addition to the bike share service, we also have bike mechanics working in there every day. So if you have an issue with your bike, and you need help fixing something, they'll help you fix it up for free. As oftentimes when you go to bike shops and stuff, labor is the most expensive cost. So they'll help you out with that. Also just trying to enhance alternative transportation options for our students, faculty, and staff. Our shuttle services are free. We have a shuttle that goes to our satellite campuses as well, Victory Parkway and Blue Ash, so trying to connect with them. And then on top of that, we have off-campus partnerships. So Savannah mentioned Groundwork Ohio River Valley. They're a really wonderful partner. We do volunteer events with them, tree plantings, things like that, to get students at the university to connect with them. And then we've also connected with other organizations in Lincoln Heights, Leap Academy on the west side, things like that. And these environmental justice issues stem further than just the Office of Sustainability. So just 2 weeks ago, Bob Hyland, a professor at UC, hosted the Environmental Justice and Advocacy Symposium. So it's not just us working on this, but it's the campus as a whole and those partnerships that really matter. So yeah, that's a little bit about us. Oh, one thing, I'm sorry, I do want to mention is in addition to the city having a plan, the university also does as well. So in 2019, we updated our sustainability and climate action plan. We do talk about resilience, we talk about equity, and all of those issues in sustainability. So if you're interested in learning more about that, our plan is on our website. And additionally, next Wednesday, we are hosting a progress report out event where you can see how we're actually implementing all of our goals and objectives in this plan now 2 years later, and hold us accountable to make sure that we continue to do so. So that's a little overview about some things we're doing at the university. And now I think we'll just open it up for questions and comments, and we'll stop talking at you so much.
There was one question that did come in through the chat while you were talking, Savannah, and Denise asked, has anyone thought of giving out LED light bulbs in Lower Price Hill?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Denise. That is something we've been chatting about. So I guess I'll elaborate on, some of the potential outcomes. We don't want to predict anything before we go through the actual exercise of the pilot, but one of the outcomes that we are looking towards is how can we take the lived experience of Lower Price Hill residents to better understand what are their needs. And how can the city and then, community organizations support those needs. And so I think energy and energy efficiency will absolutely be one of those needs because as Carla described, it's a tremendous need across the city as a whole. And not only can we connect them to our Warm Up Cincy and energy equity programs that Carla mentioned, we can also make sure that the services that, for example, Duke Energy does provide, LED light bulbs, and making sure that we connect sort of existing utility resources to make sure that those are leveraged appropriately. And so the mechanisms of how we'll do that are forthcoming, but I don't know if you would add anything else to that, Carla.
I would. I do want to share a program that sadly is no longer in existence. It's called Light Up Avondale. And Light Up Avondale actually did what you're speaking about, Denise, but for the community of Avondale. During I think it was just 2017 and 2018, through the funding of a Duke Class Benefit Fund, the Cincinnati Zoo worked on creating this program called Light Up Avondale, which was really about swapping out and installing LED light bulbs in Avondale residents' homes, community organizations, and churches, and up to what they call 50 trouble spots around Avondale to really look at efficient lighting and energy efficiency efforts in the Avondale community. And at the time, I know that they were thinking that was going to be somewhat of a pilot or best practice at the community level to do something like that. But I think the pilot closed in 2018, and I don't think that they, probably more of a funding issue, were not able to take and scale it to other communities. But it is something that other communities have been looking at.
Are there any initiatives geared towards promoting community food gardens?
Community food gardens. Yes, actually, as a matter of fact, and Savannah, I don't know, I can't remember if Green Umbrella has something like that, but I do know that the city of Cincinnati does have a community grant program that offers, I think they do this maybe maybe 2 cycles a year, that provides reimbursable funding to communities for community gardens. Let me see if I can find that information in chat that to you guys so you can find it. There's a woman by the name of Robin Henderson in the city of Cincinnati that manages that program.
Yeah, and what I'll add to that is there is, so I'll describe just sort of the suite of programs through our Food Policy Council, which is hosted through Green Umbrella. And several of these initiatives can support, I think, the development of community gardens. But the 4 main efforts through the Food Policy Council right now is a farm to school regional action plan. And so that really is about hosting regional educators workshop to network around farm to school. And I think, you know, many schools in our area have moved towards how can they include gardening as an outside educational opportunity, as well as, you know, a connection to food. There are also healthy eating and healthcare efforts. So how can we create an integrated system of nutrition education and food access programming in the region? And so that was sort of what I described before of how to amplify community voice and governance of food access, of which I think a piece of that is sort of community gardens and creating a neighborhood scale healthy food access distribution network. So again, that program is healthy eating and healthcare. Another sort of suite of efforts is consumer access to local foods. So our Food Policy Council and anyone interested working to partner with farmer markets to create sort of streamlined efficiencies and better access to markets, and, you know, creating local food purchasing incentives. And so any sort of local garden could be a part of that. And finally, institutional procurement. So how do we basically advocate for values-based purchasing among institutions in our region? And so that can include, you know, supporting the purchase of produce from these types of gardens. And I'll link to our Food Policy Council in our chat, and feel free to reach out to Michaela Oldfield or myself with any questions.
Going off of that, I'll just interject that UC actually worked with Green Umbrella to gain access to some of these local farms and get those local foods into our dining hall. So for example, we started partnering with 80 Acres Farm. And so we're able to fill most of our salad bars now with local food in the area. So that's also a goal in our sustainability and climate action plan, and something that we're prioritizing at the university as well.
Michaela said, y'all are amazing. Thank you for your hard and informed work in our community. Not all heroes wear capes. Also, everyone came out today with fabulous earrings.
Thank you.
And then Chloe asked, is there a list of all these organizations posted anywhere so we can look more into them and ways to get involved? All of the links that Carla and Aaron and Savannah have sent, I will also include in the post-event email and update the event webpage with, so you will have access to them all there.
Yeah, and the Green Umbrella website, not only does it is it a fabulous resource in terms of just like finding out information, but if you become a member, you have access to the list of other members that are part of that regional coalition. Very, very well worth it.
Yeah, thank you, Carla. You took the words right out of my mouth. We have hundreds of member organizazations, and you can absolutely learn more on the link I just posted. Another thing I want to highlight is you can also look at you know, our history of board members. We actually have a new board member coming on board named Carla Walker, and they represent a plethora of really impactful organizations across our region as well.
Great. Again, if there are any other questions, go ahead and feel free to unmute yourselves. Keep utilizing the chat box.
If it's okay, I'm going to also drop in the chat one of the most recent articles that has been written about Cincinnati and the work that we've been doing. And I want to add that in here because it's quite interesting. You know, I don't think that people actually realize or recognize how much of a national leader Cincinnati is when it comes to looking at not only climate issues, but really addressing these climate issues from an equitable lens. And we're really still working on it, right? We're not at all perfect in kind of addressing these issues. But I want to make sure that folks realize, you know, as a local municipality, with the limitations that a local municipality does have on itself, we're doing Cincinnati's doing an awful lot with very little. So I'll just kind of leave that in the chat box for folks to take a look at as well.
Great. Thank you for mentioning that, Carla. That was a very fun article. I would also add to that, you know, I encourage folks to check out our Midwest Regional Sustainability Summit. So this is a conference that is offered every year. It's Midwest in scope and hosted right here in Cincinnati. Green Umbrella, along with our partners of City of Cincinnati and Xavier University. Registration is now open, and we have some really exciting speakers and keynotes. The theme is Accelerating Action, the Path to 2030. So how can we, over the next decade, create a more sustainable, resilient, and equitable region? So feel free to reach out with any questions about the summit. But we are currently evaluating, you know, sort of the program and speaker submissions we got, and they look awesome. So I definitely encourage you to attend. And it will be all virtual, so you can come.
Cindy asked, Carla, could you speak about any initiatives that address asthma reduction and lead hazard reduction?
Just make sure I'm on mute. Okay, sure. Thanks, Cindy, for that. While these are not programs and initiatives that I am involved in myself through the work I do with the climate advisor, as the climate advisor, I can share with you that with respect to asthma here in Cincinnati, we have an incredible healthcare resource in Children's Hospital. And Children's Hospital and the Cincinnati Department of Health do have some initiatives that they are working on with respect to asthma. On the lead paint and lead hazard issue, Cincinnati's Department of Health does have a lead poisoning prevention program and a group of programs that they're working on. I think I chatted those put those in the chat. One of the things that we have been doing with our energy equity program, one of those programs in the suite of programs that we created is for the tenants, and we have been working on trying to make sure that we layer these programs with other programs that could provide benefits to that particular demographic. And so earlier in our conversations of creating this program, we did speak with the housing department in Cincinnati, because they also kind of do some lead abatement. And what we are hoping to do is make sure that for those tenants who are part of this program, as our energy auditors go in and kind of do an assessment of that tenant's unit, they are not only looking at where that unit can be upgraded for, let's say, light bulbs or pipe wrap or swapping out appliances to be more energy efficient, but those auditors are also there and can take a look at whether or not there is an issue with lead paint, or if there's a lead abatement issue that needs to happen. Now, so far, we haven't had anyone come back to us and say, yes, we need to actually bring in other services for those homes, but we have been incorporating that into the program so that those families, it's more of a one-stop shop, but those families are getting multiple services, right? Instead of just really looking at the energy efficiency piece, because it's great to have your apartment and your where you live upgraded for energy efficiency, but it does no good if you are also dealing with some of these other chronic health issues that can be addressed with some of the services. And what we've learned in developing this energy equity program is, I don't think people realize and understand that if you are operating in crisis, you have to go through so many hoops to get these services, and they're not services that are necessarily connected. So as much as we can connect those services and relieve the burden of those individuals or those families with kind of like, going and filling out a heap of applications and providing a lot of information in multiple organizations or multiple service providers, hopefully we can collapse that process for them and provide them with assistance through not only the energy efficiency work that we do, but potentially any of the lead poisoning or lead abatement work that the city does as well.
So Savannah threw a link in the chat about the 2030 district, and I think this is something that we should bring up as well, as the university has signed on to be a part of this 2030 district in the city. And I'm sure Carla or Savannah could explain this much better than I can, but I can try. You guys can feel free to jump in and correct me. So this is an initiative across the nation that cities are taking a part of. And companies are signing on to reduce their carbon emissions because of energy, water, and transportation by 50% by 2030. And Cincinnati has also added a fourth category, and this is occupant health, looking at how healthy our buildings are and those users of them. And so that's another way that Cincinnati is kind of on the highlighted for these sustainable initiatives across the nation. I don't know, Carla or Savannah, if you want to elaborate on anything about that more specifically, but something we definitely don't want to miss.
Yeah, it's actually a great resource for the members of that 2030 district. Cincinnati is one of the founding members of the Cincinnati 2030 district, and the reason I say it's such a great resource is because it's this hyper local focus on best practices, on how companies, institutions, larger scale organizations with a large footprint, how they are reducing their carbon footprint. I know the city of Cincinnati has benefited from it greatly. I don't know if you want to say something. I know that the 2030 district is housed in Green Umbrella. So I don't know if you want to say anything additional about that, Savannah.
Sure. Yeah. No, you did a great job explaining it, Erin. The only thing I'll sort of add is that this addition of occupational health as a tenet of our 2030 district in Cincinnati is tremendous. And, through the justice lens of when we think about, particularly now during COVID-19, how much time is being spent in our buildings, and how indoor air quality affects our personal health and can connect to sort of the outdoor air quality as well. In Cincinnati, we do suffer as a region from poor air quality is a really important add, and so definitely stay tuned. That is a sort of a burgeoning effort with attention to health.
And a wonderful example of how we're all working together with this, right? We just went from UC to the city to Green Umbrella, and it's going to take all of us, and that's a very great example of how we're all working together.
I want to add one thing too. Since we're also talking about EJ, and that's the focus of this conversation, with respect to how Cincinnati has responded to this, and I have a long history working with city government on these issues. And one of the things that I'll share that, again, a lot of people I don't think really know is that Cincinnati in, I want to say 2008, 2009, we were the first city in the country to craft an environmental justice ordinance that is actually on our books. It was really around what was happening in, I want to say Lower Price Hill and Price Hill, but it was really focused on some of the air quality, air pollution issues that were happening in the city at the time. Sadly, the ordinance, I think, was probably really ahead of its time. And, we're operating obviously in a very, very different world in 2021. But in 2008, when that ordinance was crafted and introduced, a lot of the teeth and a lot of the enforcement of it was pulled out. And it really, unfortunately, didn't go anywhere. But we are, it gives you an example of how the city and city leaders at the time were really thinking about environmental justice.
Yeah, and I'll just add that I'll share a document where it captures sort of the similar actions since then of cities adopting environmental justice related policies in case anyone is interested in learning more.
Are there any other questions? If there aren't any other questions, I would like to thank Carla, Savannah, and Erin for leading this conversation today. We were so happy to partner with all three of you and look forward to hopefully being able to work together again in the future. As I mentioned at the start of the event, this has been recorded and will be made available for you all in a post-event email that'll be sent out sometime within the next week. And I will also make sure that all of these links and documents and articles that Carla, Savannah, and Erin have shared will be available to you all as well. Thank you and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks for hosting. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.